Off the coast of China sits an island smaller than the Netherlands. And on that island, a single company makes around 90% of the most advanced chips on Earth. The silicon inside every iPhone, every NVIDIA AI server, every weapon system that depends on cutting-edge computing. The world has a name for this concentration of power. They call it Taiwan's silicon shield. The idea is simple and a little terrifying. Taiwan is so essential to the global economy that no one can afford to let anything happen to it. But here's the question almost nobody asks honestly. Is that shield Taiwan's greatest protection, or the single greatest point of failure in the entire world economy? And why is every other country now racing to escape it? Start with the concentration, because it is almost hard to believe. One company, TSMC, makes roughly 90% of the world's most advanced chips, and by some counts close to all of the chips used to train frontier AI models. In early 2026, TSMC became the only company on the planet manufacturing 2-nanometer chips at volume, the most advanced commercial process that exists. Not one of its rivals can match it at the leading edge today. Now layer the geography on top. Most of that production sits in a handful of science parks along the west coast of Taiwan, Hsinchu, Taichung, Tainan, a strip of land a few hours' drive end to end. So the most strategically important manufacturing on Earth, the foundation of the entire digital and AI economy, is concentrated into one company on one island, just off the coast of the one country that claims it. That is the Silicon Shield. And to understand why it matters so much, you have to look at it from two completely opposite directions at once. First, the optimistic view. The shield works and it protects Taiwan. The logic is pure deterrence. If Taiwan makes the chips the entire world runs on, then any disruption, a war, a blockade, even a bad accident, instantly damages the United States, China, Europe, and Japan, all at the same time. That shared dependence is supposed to make everyone, including Beijing, treat the island as simply too valuable to break. And the dependence is only deepening. In 2026, NVIDIA, the most valuable company in the world, is pouring around $150 billion a year into its Taiwan supply chain, and its chief executive calls the island the epicenter of the AI revolution. The advanced packaging that every AI accelerator needs is booked solid, with demand growing faster than Taiwan can build it, and the price of losing access is staggering. Bloomberg Economics modeled a war over Taiwan and estimated it could erase more than $10 trillion from global output in a single year, worse than the pandemic and the 2008 financial crisis combined. In this view, the shield is real. Taiwan's chips don't just power the world, they help keep the peace. Now the opposite view, and it is just as serious, the same concentration that creates deterrence also creates terrifying fragility. Strip away the geopolitics, and you are left with a simple engineering fact. The world has placed the foundation of its entire economy on one earthquake-prone island, inside one company, with almost no backup. Taiwan sits on the edge of two tectonic plates. In late 2025, a magnitude 7 earthquake, the strongest in nearly 3 decades, rattled northern Taiwan and forced precautionary shutdowns across the chip parks. This time, TSMC's extraordinary engineering held, and the fabs came through. But the lesson cuts both ways. The system survived, and yet the whole world held its breath over a few hours of production. Add to that the reality that TSMC's capacity is stretched to its physical limit, with leading-edge and packaging lines fully booked. There is no slack, no spare island, no second supplier waiting in the wings. A blockade, a serious quake, a drought, or a conflict wouldn't just dent the supply of cutting-edge chips. By some estimates, it would cut the world off from most of them overnight. The shield in this view is a single thread holding up the modern world. Here is where it gets genuinely strange. Once you accept that this concentration is dangerous, the obvious answer is to spread it out. Build advanced fabs somewhere else. And that is exactly what the world is now doing. The United States is spending tens of billions to pull TSMC onto American soil. The company has committed well over $100 billion to a cluster of fabs in Arizona, with plans for as many as a dozen over time, and 2-nanometer production targeted there before the end of the decade. Japan and Germany are building too. On paper, this is the world finally de-risking. But there is a catch that Taiwan understands all too well. The silicon shield only protects Taiwan as long as the crown jewel manufacturing stays on the island. Every advanced fab that opens somewhere else chips away, very slowly, at Taiwan's irreplaceability and therefore at its leverage. Voices in Taipei now openly worry that an America First push to move chip making to the United States could quietly erode the very shield that keeps Taiwan safe. So the world faces a real paradox. The safest thing for the global supply chain may be the most dangerous thing for Taiwan. Which raises the real question. Can you actually move the silicon shield at all? And here the engineering answer is humbling. Rivals are racing hard. Intel's most advanced process, 18A, actually reached production slightly ahead of TSMC's competing node, a genuine milestone. But it still trails on yield and density, and Intel admits it won't hit world-class yields until around 2027. Samsung's 2-nanometer class process is running at far lower yields and has struggled to win big customers. TSMC, meanwhile, still leads on density, on maturity, and on the thing that's hardest to copy, an ecosystem of customers, suppliers, and engineers built over 30 years and packed into a few square miles. That's the deepest point of all. The silicon shield was never really the buildings, or even the machines. Those you can buy. It's the accumulated know-how, the supplier web, the workforce, and the yield that only comes from decades of doing it at massive scale. You can pour $100 billion of concrete in Arizona. Recreating that density of expertise is far, far harder, which is exactly why, even as everyone talks about diversifying, the most important chips in the world still flow through Taiwan. So here's the honest verdict, and it refuses to fit on a bumper sticker. The silicon shield is real, and it is a liability at the very same time. It genuinely gives Taiwan deterrence because the world really cannot afford to lose it. And it genuinely is a single point of failure because the world really has no backup. Both things are true at once. But the most important pattern is the one underneath the headlines. The shield is slowly draining, not because anyone attacked it, but because the entire world is quietly trying to copy it. And the deepest irony is this. Even as governments spend hundreds of billions to build fabs elsewhere, the companies with the most at stake, the NVIDIAs and Apples of the world, are still routing their most valuable chips through Taiwan and investing there more, not less. That tells you where the real capability still lives. So the question for this decade isn't whether the shield gets attacked. It's what happens to Taiwan's leverage as the rest of the world slowly and expensively learns to make what only Taiwan can make today. Watch the fabs, not the speeches. The chips will tell you who actually holds the power. If you've followed this channel, you've watched 3 countries try to break into chip making from 3 different directions: India buying in, Japan leaping ahead, and China going it alone under sanctions. This is the island they are all, in one way or another, trying to escape. The silicon shield is the center of gravity for the entire global chip war. Economic, military, and technological all at once. There's a whole layer here the headlines miss, and it's the layer that actually decides who holds power this century. So if you want the chip world explained the way the industry really sees it, no hype, no taking sides, subscribe and stay with it.